So this is a time for questions, comments, reports. Yes.
Well, you asked a question before heading into the guided meditation that no one answered correctly, and I'm guessing that maybe the real answer is kind of like the moon, maybe that you can't really say, but you can maybe point at it. Not really sure, but I'm wondering if in the guided meditation what you were pointing at was something like you're expressing or saying thank you to Herschel wasn't thanking him for a thing, but was a demonstration of something, a demonstration of gratefulness. That somehow answered his question, that the demonstration was the answer. Is that kind of...
Well, yes, I wasn't, those are two different topics. But one thing one could say is that, so I'm not saying that I wasn't thanking him for anything, but I am saying that one thing one could say is that he asked a question. He said, how can I know who to trust? And I told him the answer. This is how. I will now show you how to know who to trust, like this. And then I showed him how to do it.
I don't understand.
It seems totally obvious. I don't see how you can't understand that. How can that not be clear? Apparently it's not clear. So it's like he said, what is an orange? Then I gave him an orange. And it seems strange because he says, well, what is this? Right?
Yeah.
And he's looking on it for some label. Maybe he finds the code that they use to check it out of the supermarket. And it wouldn't say orange, and he doesn't understand. It's very strange, right? It's not strange at all. It's totally obvious. He asked a clear question, and I told him the answer. How do I know who to trust? Like this. Do this thing that I'm now showing you. And then everyone's confused. It doesn't seem reasonable to be confused at this moment, I have to say. Isn't it clear? How can it not be clear? If you have the state of mind of thank you, then you can know who to trust. So this is how you have that state of mind, like this. Have this state of mind. Do this that I'm showing you. How do I cook curry? Then I made curry, gave it to him. And everybody then says, but how do you make curry? Right? Yes? How do I get to the store? And then take you to the store. You say, okay, but how do I get to the store? You see?
Felt a little bit like you took us to the store blindfolded.
Yeah.
Well, you can keep your eyes closed if you want on the way to the store. But there was nothing hidden at all. I think it's more like I took you to the store rather than showing you a map, but you refused to look away from the map. So you still don't know how to get to the store.
We were looking at Google Maps all the way there, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the store isn't in Google Maps. It's not. You will not find it in there. You can try to whatever you wanted to buy, say an orange at the store, you can try to eat the phone and it won't taste like an orange. Yes? Just how it is.
Thank you.
Nowadays it's very hard for us. it's very difficult for us to, I intentionally ignored what you just said.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult for us to see the difference between a facsimile and the authentic thing. Yes? That's very difficult for us. Nowadays, we're deeply confused about this. Modern people are. To the point that if something isn't a facsimile, we don't want it. Facsimiles, the fakes, replicas, are what we live in nowadays. So we don't have an easy time telling the difference between just to put it, I'm trying to come up with another example, but I'm failing, so I'm going to give this one again. It's very hard for us to tell the difference between a real friend and someone who on a website is labeled friend. It's hard for us to tell the difference. We trust. So as Joseph said, you have to trust something. Yes? You're just left with that. And I think he did a great job of bringing the significance, the urgency of this to life. And beyond that, the question, so I would try to take it one step further and say, so the question comes, what do you trust? And what you actually trust isn't just, as I've said again and again, just philosophical speculation. It's demonstrable with what you actually spend your life doing, paying attention to. Okay? So you have gurus. You can measure the reverence you have for various gurus by the amount of time you spend, by the amount of energy, the amount of life that you give to them. Okay? So if you consider life or well-being, nature, we have a simplified version of all that, of happiness, safety. Yes? We have a version of that. We have a way of approximating all of that called money. Money is not the real thing, but it's supposed to represent the real thing or something. Nobody seems entirely sure about how that works. If you spend your time in the money economy, then you trust that. You just do. Whether you say you do or not, you still do. Yes? If you people talk about me as a kind of a guru, but as I said before, if you spend your time on a social media site more than you spend your time listening to these talks, then I'm not your guru. That organization is your guru, and you trust them. You're giving your attention to them, the one precious thing that's irretrievable. You irrevocably give your life to trusting that entity. That's just a fact, but those things are replicas of relationships. They're pretend, they're fake, but we can't tell the difference, and so we trust things that aren't real nowadays more than ever before. To the point where if something if the real thing is given to us, we don't want it. We don't believe in it because we've practiced hour after hour, day after day, year after year, not trusting that. Not trusting it. So it's foreign to us when we ask a question and an actual answer is given. We want the facsimile. We want the explanation, the description, the intellectual version. We want some technique, some system, some idea, somebody's view. But all of these things all of these things are proxies, handles. They are, we have acquiesced to delusion. Now, that's okay to acquiesce to delusion and participate in these things. Yes? That's not bad. It's humble, actually. It's reasonable, and we can say thank you for all these things. They're not bad things. That would be weird if I was telling... Again, you should look at hypocrisy. If I'm telling you, verbal teachings are bad, that's a weird thing to say. I have a sense that people don't really investigate and they say, oh, yeah, okay, so Soryu thinks that verbal teachings are bad. He said so. That would be a weird thing to say. That's not what I'm saying. We can be grateful for that. It's humble. It's appropriate. Yes? But we can't... But if we're stuck in that, if that's all that we're grateful for, then when the real thing comes along, we miss it. And the thing is, the real thing is always coming along. It's always coming along. And in this way, the metaphors don't work entirely. Yes? Does that connect to your question? Yes. Yes. Did you have something or not? If not, it's fine.
I have a question.
Yes.
Well, I recollected a conversation with you one time where we talked about the importance of holding ourselves accountable.
Yeah.
And how you really can't do it for anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And I also heard you say that as students, part of our responsibility is to hold you accountable.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a piece of my question. And I know that I might be just adding on to it, but my additional question, just with regard to trust, is when we're having those relationships around accountability, how can we observe whether the accountability that we're receiving or giving is attacking or accountability?
This is a great question. In the way I hear it, you've mentioned different parts of a whole. One part of the whole is that we can only hold ourselves accountable. Yes? Another part of the whole is that we should hold each other accountable. So it isn't, of course, I say a lot that the community should hold the leader, the guru, for example, accountable to certain ethical standards. And it's implied, but I'll make it explicit, that the teacher, the leader, should hold the community accountable to ethical standards. So there's a relationship there. There is the formulation of a loving connection in which what everyone wants is enabled by others. Okay? Does that make sense? Because we accept, I think one of the most important things to accept is that on the one hand, a lot of these ethical questions are difficult. They're confusing. Certain things may seem clear from a certain perspective, but from another perspective, they're not clear. And so, on the one side, we can descend into some kind of fundamentalism around right and wrong, and if you do anything wrong at all, then you're just evil, and I don't want to have a relationship with you anymore. On the other side, we can descend into moral relativism, and well, everyone just has their own opinion. Who knows? It's too messy. We can't say. Or it doesn't matter. Yes? What we want is to transcend right and wrong. Go beyond all that so that we don't have to worry about it anymore. But the good news is that in this relationship, we are helped to not fall into either view, into either extreme. Because what we do, it turns out, from other people's perspectives, does matter. It hurts them, maybe. That should be shown to us so that we can respond to that. It turns out that even though we did something that may have hurt someone, it's possible that there was a reason for that. Maybe there were limitations in our abilities, or there were other things to consider. And so we have to see it from a larger perspective. Or that maybe our own preferences aren't the most important thing in a situation, whoever's that is, whether it's the teacher, the leader, or someone else's. And so because of this give and take relationship, everyone's attempting to hold each other accountable. Therefore, everybody is helped to get what they want, which is ethical progress. The support in moving forward in the struggles around how we should live. Because we accept in all of this, number one, that it is a struggle to even know what to do. But beyond that, even as many people know, if you've tried this, you know that sometimes you know something's the right thing to do and you still can't get yourself to do it. You know something's the wrong thing to do, and yet you find yourself doing it again. Whether that's a physical action or a way of speaking to each other or thinking patterns, we know that it's not appropriate or ideal, and yet we still do it. And so the more support we can get, the easier it is. Yes? The more other people help us out, the better for us. Because otherwise the sense of failing can become overwhelming. So if other people help us along, we can move forward. So it's something in which if everybody wants to move forward in these ways, then these relationships are very helpful for us in doing that. In terms of how do we know, so does that make sense first before I continue to the very clear question you asked at the end? Is that right? So in terms of knowing whether we're being supportive or attacking, whether we're holding us all accountable to both living in the way we want to, but also in clarifying how we want to live, as we do that, how do we know if it's merely attacking? Well, there are a lot of different ways of knowing. I only have a few more minutes, but so first of all, just because one might be attacking, that doesn't mean that it's necessarily the wrong thing to do. Okay? It's not necessarily bad just because you're attacking. to attack. It might still be the right thing to do. But one should know that first of all, just isn't the most effective thing to do. Yes? So sometimes we can't be the most effective. So we acknowledge that and we're relatively ineffective. Yes? Well, okay, fine. You know? We don't have to be perfect in order to act. It's through acting that we purify our minds. Yes? It's not that we can't say, I'm not going to do anything until I know exactly what to do and I'm perfect at doing it, because it's by doing things that we come to know what to do and get better at doing it. Yes? So sometimes we attack in a way that isn't very helpful, but it's not necessarily the wrong thing to do. But at the same time, we can still acknowledge that it's typically not the most effective way to bring forth change. Peace Pilgrim, I think, was very clear on this. The way she put it, she said, it's of the utmost importance that you not judge others, because if you do, then you rob them of the chance to judge themselves. So she's not actually saying judgment is bad, which, as I've said again and again, is a weird thing to say. It's hypocrisy, it's quintessential hypocrisy to claim that judgment is a bad thing. Does that make sense?
I think I emailed you about that once.
Yeah, it just seems strange.
My perspective on that is that judgment is so good that only the divine or God can do it.
Yeah, great. It's a great way to put it. So she is trying to enable the divine to judge that person, but the divine part of themselves. Yes? And if we do that for them, even the divine part does that for them, then that part of them doesn't get the chance. So she's not saying people shouldn't be judged. She's saying people should be judged in the best way possible. Yes? And so if we do approach someone in this attacking way, then it's unlikely that will happen. So it's true nonetheless, though, that we could attack them in some terrible, selfish, delusional, evil way. But good news, they might be so divine that that's actually the most helpful thing for them, because that's a high challenge level, and so you're giving them the best opportunity because they're so much more evolved than you are. You know? Right? Yeah, right. So if that's the case, then you might be really helping them. But maybe that isn't the case for them. That's possible. And beyond that, that might not be the most effective way for you to see them. That might not be the most thank you-oriented way of making contact with them. And so we end up looking carefully into our own minds as we are interacting to search for these qualities, for the various qualities of our own minds within the interaction. And then we attempt to actually make contact with them in the most effective way that we can, both in terms of the cultivation of those qualities in our own minds. It's a chance for us to practice those qualities in our own minds, and also it's a chance to give them the chance. It's the opportunity for them to see themselves from this divine perspective. Does that help? Right. So we simply work towards that. We do our best to work in that direction.